Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda, 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 Namanda. Please join me in chanting Shishin Lai. We'll then read 3 treasures, followed by the chanting of Ju Sege. Three treasures. Hard is it to be born into human life, now we're living it. Difficult is it to hear the teachings of the Blessed One, now we hear it. If we do not realize the truth in this life, when will it be realized? Let us reverently take refuge in the 3 treasures of the truth. I take refuge in the Buddha. May we absorb ourselves in the principle of the way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves the supreme will. I take refuge in the Dharma. May we be submerged in the depths of the doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in the Sangha. May we live in harmony in the great assembly as disciples of Buddha and be freed from all hindrances, becoming units of true accord in the life of harmony, in a spirit of universal oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriad ages of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we're able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of the Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. ナモアミダ仏。ナモアミダ仏。ナマンダーナマンダーナマンダーナマンダーナマンダーナマンダーナマンダー。重世芸。ガゴン長世願意志無浄土志願不満足政府上昇学ガオ無量光不意大世主不採小便具政府上昇学餓死上仏道妙正長実法苦行未消門政府上昇学利欲人少年上映修凡行死具無浄土一生天人死人力現代公不生無才道少女三苦妙交際集約難回避知恵言滅死根門案閉塞小悪道通達全宗門高僧上満足異様老実法日願修十期天候音普賢一種解放僧公正苦毒法上王大集中説法四四苦供養一切部具足修徳本元年心上満徳一三概要如仏無下知通達未不詳願学営力投資最小尊志願若国家大戦の感動国小天人と珍妙見ナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブナマンダブ願にしくどく平等性際道本菩提 Namanda, 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 it's Namanda, 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 Namanda. Good morning. Thanks everyone for coming today. I'd like to start the next portion of our service with my Dharma message. But give me just a moment. I have a screen to share. I'd like to wish everyone a happy Black History Month. These days, I continue to think about racism and the many other forms of marginalization that happen in our society and around the world. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the self, karma, and intersectionality in honor of Black History Month. This Gosandai may look familiar because I used it last week as well. This is also a Dharma talk I gave last year, but I think it's something that's good to reflect on. So if you join me in Gassho, I'd like to share the words from Tanisho. Good thoughts arise in us through the prompting of good karma from the past, and evil comes to be thought and performed through the working of evil karma. The late master said, know that every evil act done, even as slight as the particle on the tip of a strand of rabbit's fur or sheep's wool, has its cause in past karma. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda. In Buddhism, we have a number of teachings, and one of them is that our lives are extremely complex. Who we are, our very being, is an amalgamation of causes and conditions that have made us into the person that we are today. That person is constantly changing, and we're always being affected by our world. And in turn, we shape the world around us. What I'm describing here is dependent co-arising or interdependence. If we sit here quietly, calmly, mindfully, it isn't too hard to see our lives in this way. However, our teachings also tell us that this isn't our mind's natural way of being. We get caught up in our frustrations and forget all the supportive connections to others that we have. Some of these connections are easy to rely on. These might be sources of love, of comfort, and of sustenance when we're feeling sad or upset. Some of the connections may be challenging and force us to grow. This complex understanding of the interdependent self and suffering is a very important aspect of Buddhist doctrine. Buddhist teachers, masters, and scholars often talk about Buddhist concepts as interpenetrating binaries. This means that ultimately, there are two contrasting principles or ideas, but they aren't necessarily separate. Sometimes we use the illusion, two sides of the same coin. That is, there are two different perspectives on the same problem, issue, or topic. We could perhaps think about these perspectives as immanence versus transcendence. In Dharmological terms, immanence is the pervasive nature of Buddha, or Buddha manifesting itself within our world and our everyday lives. Whereas transcendence is viewing Buddha as a goal of attainment, or perhaps a promise or hope that we will rise above the world of suffering. To me, both are valuable perspectives. So it's not a case of believing that Buddha is either transcendent or immanent. Rather, Buddha is both. With that in mind today, I'd like to consider the Buddhist teaching that I brought up right after the Gosandai, the interdependent self, along with a sociological construct known as intersectionality. I see these two as valuable perspectives on the self that can teach us a lot. Two sides of the same coin, if you will. which is how we experience and understand the self. We just considered a general understanding of the Buddhist teaching on the interdependent self. But what is intersectionality? This term was coined by Black lawyer, civil rights advocate, philosopher, feminist, and scholar of critical race theory, Kimberly Crenshaw. The theory of intersectionality is the study of overlapping or intersecting social identities and their related systems of oppression, domination, and discrimination. Intersectionality was initially developed by Crenshaw in the 1980s to address the double oppression that women of color, particularly Black women, experience due to their marginalized racial and gender identities. This topic is useful for us in many situations because sometimes our lives are extremely hard due to some of the intersecting aspects of our identities. That is to say that discrimination, hate, or violence intersect and are compounded by our many identities and how they are either normalized or marginalized. Some examples are sexuality, gender, race, class and wealth, disability, and other parts of who we are. At the same time, we might not have to worry so much about some of those aspects of our identities because they are privileged by society and some of our communities. I'd also like to acknowledge that some of these things change, and whether or not their advantages or disadvantages can change too, depending on the setting or the community that we're in. I've been working on understanding how I can personally work to root out racism in myself and my communities, especially in the past few years. The model of intersectionality is very clearly intended to identify different layers of sanctioned oppression, violence, and marginalization that people face in our society based on the many aspects of our identities. It's a powerful tool of understanding and for critiquing elements in our society that cause a great deal of suffering. And it's also a useful way to understand ourselves as individuals and how we benefit from or are harmed by these norms in our society. Let's take a moment to look at an example of power and privilege in the United States today, broken down by various components of the intersectional self. The dominant culture which has shaped our society here is white, especially European American. American in nationality, upper and middle class, Protestant, which is Christian, male, cisgender, heterosexual, and able-bodied. These are all privileged identities, broadly speaking, in the United States culture. When I look at these aspects of dominant culture, I'm more able to clearly see where I fit and reflect more deeply on parts of society where I benefit, where I have advantage over other folks. I can also see parts of my identity that don't fit into the norms of our society, where I might experience oppression, marginalization, or even violence. Now, the list I provided is a broad summary of dominant culture in the United States, but there are diverse communities in our country. So that means that there isn't necessarily one ultimate dominant US culture. However, this list provides a pretty comprehensive description of those who hold power and influence, especially in our government. We can affirm that understanding by looking at the people in our government, of which a majority is composed of the people who fit within the identities listed here. Kimberly Crenshaw says that if we can't see a problem, then we can't fix the problem, which I think is a very Buddhist observation. Here, I'd like to come back to our Buddhist teachings from the passage of Tanisho 13 that I shared for today's Gosandai. Shinran states that every action we take is a result of past karma. There's a religious or transcendent aspect of this teaching that deals with the metaphysical nature of the self here, our enlightenment, religious awakening, and birth in the Pure Land as they relate to our quote-unquote evil acts. This transcendence is important. However, I'd like to tie this understanding of karma to everything we do as a result of karma, to Crenshaw's model of intersectionality. Our complex and dynamic selves exist as they are due to past karma. due to the relationships that we have. We live in an ever-changing web of relationship with others that's affecting who we are as individuals and the effort or karma that we put into the world around us. Buddhist teachings encourage us to look deep within ourselves to understand who we are. And in so doing, we might better understand the karmic activity that's occurring in our lives. Using the model of intersectionality, we might gain a better understanding of who we are, where we hold power and privilege, and where we might be marginalized or disregarded by those in power. If we combine this view of the self as multi-layered and constantly interacting with others who have their own configurations of selfhood, then we might be able to understand others as well. This understanding is crucial as a component to building lasting and meaningful relationships and founding communities based on equanimity and mutual care. I've been thinking a lot about these concepts around connection because I'm worried about the hatred and violence that's so common in our society. We celebrate Black History Month because there's such a disturbingly violent history of racism towards Black folks in the United States. And in spite of that, Black communities have made major contributions to our society, and they're a part of our human family. We hope that by understanding the pain endured by Black communities over the generations, and by celebrating the beauty and wonderful contributions that Black people have made around the world, and the common humanity that we all share, we can form more equitable and just society in the United States. This history, filled with pain and violence, with beauty and love, is a part of the karma of our nation. We can't hope to live in peace and love without carefully considering the complex nature of discrimination that's built into our society and into our government. In Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, we recite the name of Amida Buddha, saying Namo Amida Butsu. It's an act of taking refuge. Nambutsu requires us to see ourselves, others, and society honestly. And it also requires us to entrust in other power to grow and mature spiritually. When we break down the components of the self into its constituent pieces, like the ones of the intersectional model of race, nationality, class, religious identity, gender, sexuality, ability, race, and perhaps others, then we'll certainly find differences. But I know that we'll also find shared experiences. We can learn from both how we differ from others and how we have a lot in common. A crucial aspect of this entrusting in other power when we say Namo Amida Butsu is in relying on the power of others in our lives, literally other people, other sentient beings, to guide us and show us the way. Taking refuge may have a metaphysical or transcendent religious aspect of relying on Buddha to guide us in life. But at the same time, taking refuge is absolutely an experience of immanence, which is to say that our reliance on Buddha is just as much a reliance on learning from other people in the world, as they share their experiences of pain and hardship, of victory and joy, and of love. I'd like to close my Dharma message today with a passage from the Kyogyo Shinsho, where Shinran is quoting Pure Land Master Shandao. Please join me in Gassho. The Dharma gates, each distinct, number 84,000. But the keen blade for severing ignorance, its efforts, its effects, and the karmic cause for suffering is the name of Amida. In a single utterance, one's karmic evil is completely swept away. Gone are countless traces of past karma and the designing thoughts arising from them. Even without being instructed, we turn and enter the gate of suchness, gaining freedom from long kalpas of suffering in the Saha world, is above all the benevolence of Shakyamuni, the true teacher. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda. Thank you for coming today. That'll conclude our Dharma family service for the last Sunday of February. I'm going to unmute everyone and stop the recording. And then if you'd like, we can chat for a little bit.